I'm Dr. Julie Pham, founder of Curiosity Based. We help people practice curiosity in the world, starting in the workplace, because that is where we spend most of our waking hours. Curiosity as a practice boils down to self-awareness, relationship building, and clear communication. So join us as we interview leaders to see how they use curiosity at work. Welcome to the Curiosity at Work podcast. Today, I am so happy that I get to introduce you to Rachael Steward, who is the Deputy Director of Housing Operations at Seattle Housing Authority. And that is the largest department at SHA. And we've gotten to work with Rachael for a couple of years now, and she's got a pretty challenging job that actually will presents a lot of opportunities to practice curiosity. So Rachael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
So first, let's just start off. If you could describe your role and the workplace, how many employees there are, do they work virtually or in person? What's it? Describe it for us.
Sure. So Seattle Housing Authority is the largest affordable housing provider in the city of Seattle. We house in our owned and managed units about 37,000 people across the city of Seattle. And that's in 9,000 different units, housing units. Those include single family homes, as well as 1-bedroom studio apartments on up to 5-bedroom units that are in high-rise buildings, as well as low and mid-rise buildings, duplexes, triplexes, kind of every sort of different housing type that you can imagine. It exists somewhere in our portfolio across the city of Seattle. And in order to have all of that housing function, Seattle Housing Authority has a department, the department that I'm in, which is housing operations, and we are just shy of 500 full-time equivalencies or employees. The agency at large also provides housing for residents utilizing housing choice vouchers, and the voucher system houses another 20,000 or so people across the city of Seattle, and they use those vouchers in the private market at their will. We have an additional 400 or so employees across another 5 or 6 departments that make up the total of about 900 employees within the city of Seattle, Seattle Housing Authority. So those folks primarily work in a hybrid situation. Those folks who work in office settings have an opportunity to come into the office 2 to 3 times a week, typically, depending on the nature of their work. And then those folks who are working on site in our various different properties to make sure that they are maintained and customers are served well, they are typically present there or somewhere in our properties 5 days a week.
So in your housing operation, so it's mostly on site, right? More so than the other departments? Do you have a higher ratio of on-site people?
We do have a higher ratio of on-site individuals because property management, maintenance, landscaping, those crews, admissions, employment, community services, community builders, education, youth development, team members, they are all a part of housing operations. There are some folks who are doing administrative supports for our departments and for our teams who are able to work a little bit more remotely, but far and above, we are a hands-on group or a team across the city.
Oh, I didn't realize that you had even the outreach programs next to the maintenance programs. That's a lot of diversity actually in terms of function, even within housing operations then.
Excuse me. Yes, housing operations has a wide variety of staff members who are doing everything that it takes to keep a unit, a building, and a full property or community functioning. The only activity that we don't have within our particular department is solid waste. And solid waste, because we pick up our own garbage and we actually contract with other organizations as well to pick up their waste, that lives in our asset management department.
Thank you. So listeners, you get an education in how public housing works, as well as learning, as well as you'll get to hear some tips from Rachel about how to practice and foster curiosity among the team members in such a diverse workforce too. So uh, so Rachel, I also know that you've worked for 20 years, not just in housing, but also in higher ed. So you have a lot of this public sector experience. So
I started my career in higher education. I worked for my alma mater in New Orleans, Louisiana, and largely because I became completely enamored with working in community settings, but finding ways to leverage the resources that higher education institutions had access to and connection to be able to improve the communities where they sit. And so initially as a college age student, I actually worked with the Housing Authority of New Orleans in providing tutoring services to children who lived in the CJ Pete housing development. Mm-hmm. And then later, as an employee, I did a number of different projects, but in terms of connection with the Housing Authority there, we delivered programs and services to folks at CJ Pete, Iberville, and the Lafitte housing developments. And this was in early 2000s, in the very early 2000s, before Hurricane Katrina. And so I've been connected to public housing for a number of years, even through universities. And universities are a wonderful conduit for passing resources throughout a community. And oftentimes, public housing residents and the public housing authorities are overlooked in delivering those resources simply because people don't know what the access points are. And so one of the things I've been excited about, and to the point of curiosity, right, is what are the access points? How do you shine light on them? And then how do you push that door open and keep it open so that you are able to truly leverage all of the assets and strengths that are within your community?
Yeah, because it can be quite the bureaucracy, the public sector element of it can be quite daunting. So we talk about a curiosity base. We talk about curiosity as a practice. You know this because we've worked with Seattle Housing Authority, and we talk about it as these three elements of self-awareness, relationship building, clear communication. So could you give a specific example or story of how you've helped encourage the foster a practice of curiosity at your workplace?
Sure. When I joined Seattle Housing Authority in 2018, I was coming from Seattle University and had been steeped in higher education for quite a long time, and had come from a set of values for myself and for my team members of being continuous learners. And it didn't seem necessary at all to change that because I was changing my seat on the bus, so to speak. And so my leadership within the Community Services Division, which is where I began my work here at Seattle Housing Authority, was to begin leaning into the opportunities for myself and for my team to seek information and understanding that maybe we thought we had or that we just really could benefit from. And so right away I said, all right, you all, we are now continuous learners. We are committed to learning. And the first thing we're going to do is learn how we work together. And I made sure that it was fun and that the efforts around curiosity or learning and self-development, self-awareness was something that was joyous and celebratory, as well as something that we did together in a community. Learning together makes it easier to work together. And if you are working together, and you're doing transformative work, you thereby are also learning together. And so my strategy has always been, number one, to name it out loud in a way that is clear and distinct, but two, to also make it something that you can't pull apart. It is just what we do. It is how we do things. And we're excited and we can celebrate it. The other component there is that when we're curious, and when we are leaning into learning, it's okay to have mistakes and even to have failures, because those are key pieces to being able to expand our understanding.
Rachel, I remember you sharing with me a story of how you had to learn in public and with your own self-awareness of, I think it was had to do with a survey, and you were wondering, hey, why aren't the people who are filling out the survey more diverse? And then you found out, could you tell the story? You know, the one I'm talking about.
Sure. So it was a meeting. So I was in my first year here at the Housing Authority, and prior to working at the Housing Authority, I had worked with SHA as a subcontracted grant recipient through Seattle Housing, or excuse me, through Seattle University. And my exposure to the residents was all within our what we call garden communities. So Yesler, High Point, Rainier Vista, New Holly. And my knowledge of them were that they were people of color. And many of them were folks who spoke many other languages, including and beyond English. And so they said, well, Rachel, this is going to be your first joint policy advisory council or committee meeting. And this particular team of people who are coming are all residents from our properties. And, it'll be like 2 people from every property in our high-rise portfolio. And so I, started talking with staff about, okay, well, what do we need to do to make sure that you all prepared? Do you need anything from me? Do we need to have interpreters set and ready to go? Do we have enough, space in the room? And, all these things, just let me know what you need, right? But I'm also listing out all the things I think that they'll need because, I know. And so they said, no, Rachel, we've got it. All you have to do is just show up. Okay, fantastic. So I walk in and I don't see the faces I'm expecting. Instead, I see older white residents. And I was baffled. I was like, you know what? Something is amiss here. Mm-hmm. And of course, in my head, I'm going, and it's not me.
You're not doing your job.
Right. Somebody around here is not doing something, but it's not me. And so I turned to my team members and I said, you all, who are these people? And where are the people that I'm expecting? And they said, Rachel, the folks in these particular portfolios in these buildings are a different demographic than those in our garden communities. I was like, but I still didn't really believe it. I was still skeptical. And so Rachel being Rachel, come back to my office, log into the computer and open up our databases where I have, where all the demographic information is, and you can break it all down. And sure enough, lo and behold, the demographics for this portfolio are pretty much opposite of what I thought that they were. And so I had to go back and tell the staff, you guys, you know what? I don't know if you know it. You probably do. But just in case, I owe you an apology. It's my bad. And they just laughed. They were like, no, we know, Rachel, like people always think of one type of individual or family group needing housing in the city of Seattle, because that is often the conversation that we have here. But in fact, there is a wide range of people, and surely the numbers are disproportionate of BIPOC individuals and disabled individuals who are living in our housing compared to the larger Seattle population. But it's not exclusive in the way that you may see in other communities. Like when I lived in New Orleans and was working with the Housing Authority of New Orleans, where, it was probably 98% people of color and primarily people who were Black and of African-American heritage.
Yeah, so it's that the practicing curiosity is also admitting when I thought I knew something and I didn't, and how it can actually open it up to admitting, when you admit that, how can it open up to that mutual learning that you were talking about? So, because how many people haven't apologized? Think about how many people don't go back and apologize and admit they didn't know, or they pretend that they know. So,
Right. And that was, for me, it is, and especially in working with a new team, it's very intentional to make a mistake, call it out. I'm not saying that wasn't authentic, but rather I realized I made a mistake and shoot, I shouldn't play it off, because if I do that, then how is that invitational to my coworkers and my colleagues to trust me if I'm not trusting them. So I find that is really important, and it helps me to be in integrity with myself, which for me is paramount.
Thank you, Rachel. And so now let's talk about, you actually kind of gave an example. We're going to ask you for another example of when is it hard to practice curiosity in the workplace? And I know at SHA, there is a lot of diversity in terms of class, in terms of educational backgrounds. This was even the liberal arts education versus vocational education. And how does that play in terms of learning from one another, encouraging people to learn from one another?
Sure.
What makes it hard?
So I think, I think that practicing curiosity in the workplace can be difficult, especially in the public sector when it seems like you are in a bureaucracy and there is already set protocol, or that the procedures are rigid. It does not invite you to ask questions except for what to do next, or where is the manual that would tell me where to do why. And so long as we allow ourselves to kind of rest on our laurels that way, then we don't probe and ask questions. And when I initially came to SHA, I expected someone to walk in with a big binder and say, okay, this is what you do and this is how you do it. Have a great time. And in fact, that didn't happen. In fact, they said, well, how did you think that you might want to do this? And then I go, let me just see for a minute, let me go check it out. And so the fact that there wasn't a binder, that there wasn't a script that was in place in the way that we imagine there to be in public entities and the way that the work happens, forced me to make sure that I was asking questions. And at the same time, too, I think part of what you were mentioning, where SHA as a large organization, about 900 staff who do a full range of work, everyone here has such different training and different ways of talking, thinking, and approaching their work and seeing the work of others, that sometimes it can be difficult to know where a connection point is with your coworker or your colleague. And in those moments and in those instances, sometimes we also freeze up and thinking, well, I'm at work, one, and so there's a certain way that I can or should interact with the people that I'm operating with or working with. And two, that way should be very boxed up and very, very formalized. But when you have staff members, you have teams of people who have so many different backgrounds, sometimes you should just start with who they are and just be curious about who they are and then get to the work, because it's highly likely that something about who they are is what informs how they do their work. And if you listen, then if you can listen to how they speak to you and what they're speaking to you about, it can help give you clues about how you can share with them in a way that they can receive as well. And coming from the space of universities, the way that I talked about ideas or asking questions or challenging things was with very different language and approach. Even the swiftness of my speech, let alone the vocabulary, was very different. I was just in a different industry. And so I've had to learn how to change the way that I facilitate meetings to a degree to fit where I am. And then much of the work that I've had to do over the last 2 years in the deputy director role is to facilitate learning opportunities for our staff across the department and trying to find entry points and multiple different modalities to deliver information and really educe learning and understanding and sharing for 900 or so people who are all doing something different is really challenging because my learning experiences were all in 4-year universities in the South, not in the
That regional
Northwest.
culture.
Yes, yes. And my undergraduate, my master's degree is in public administration. So that makes sense. But my undergraduate degree, like in my formative years, I have a degree in biology. Like the way that information is shared in that setting is very different than the way that we need to share information and engage with one another in this setting.
Yeah. So just to recap here, it's just like what makes it difficult is all of the people coming from really those different backgrounds that can make the language, even the approaches, really difficult to intersect. So how can you then practice curiosity? And what I also hear you saying is also make time to learn about one another to get to that. So, all right, Rachel, now we have the final question, which is, what is a resource that you turn to inspire curiosity within yourself? And this doesn't have to be work related.
Well, honestly, I have a very close relationship with my family. My parents and my siblings are all here locally, and I get to enjoy them kind of like at the drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. And we all do very different things. I have 2 sisters. There's 8 of us all together, and I have 2 sisters. And I still think of myself, because my 2 sisters are my stepsisters, which means I didn't have them in my life for as long as I had my brothers in my life. And my brothers, as you can imagine, being like the only girl, they were good at picking at me and challenging me and questioning me. And I always tried to make sure I gave it back to them as hard as they gave it to me, just troublemaking. And so anyhow, saying all that to say, in my family dynamic, we have always had so much fun challenging one another, but then also really lifting each other up and inviting into one another's spaces. And my mother is the greatest instigator of all of that.
Yes, that's definitely true.
Yes, my mother is Ruby Love. And anyone who knows her knows that she is the most energetic, we can do it, let's try it again, do it some more if you loved it person. And she keeps all of us on our toes. She is the primary instigator. And we celebrate with one another all the time. There's an expectation of making contributions in our family. You contribute to the community, you contribute to your family, and you invite others along with you. And so, in fact, anytime someone comes to one of our family gatherings or something like that, they won't be the only person who's not blood related. We are the type of folks who are inviting new people all the time. And we find that the folks that we bring into our family circle are always people who have such cool things that they're doing. And so it is in that circle and in that family community that I have that I get ignited over and over again to explore new things, to reconsider what I think I know, and to laugh at myself, because I do some silly stuff too.
Rachel, thank you so much for sharing. And I love that your family is the inspiration for that. It's a source of inspiring curiosity within you. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience with us on the Curiosity at Work podcast today. And listeners, continue to practice curiosity at work.